As the sound of the chime that comes from that bowl slowly stops, it's time for us to center down for worship. Good morning. We will start our worship today singing Spirit of God, Descend Upon My Heart in the Worship and Song Green Book, number 143. It's time for announcements. How many of you were here when we arrived for chat room? There were police cars here. It's like, whoa, what's going on in Fairfield? And it was a wandering donkey. that was rounded up before most of you came here, but it was not the normal arrival at the meeting house when you see two sheriff's cars in the parking lot. So for any of you who were here, we watched the donkey be corralled. But that's our announcement, big news in Fairfield. Other announcements, Randy. Oh, yes, sorry. People on Zoom, any announcements?
Yes, I want to thank everyone who brought in their donation for Family Promise. I'll be picking those up tomorrow. If someone could just make sure that the refrigerated items are put in the Family Promise refrigerator, the other items can stay out on the counter, and I'll pick them up tomorrow and deliver them tomorrow to the Resource Center. But thank you everyone for your donations. We are starting our Family Promise Support Week, so we'll be providing meals to the shelter. There is one additional 18-year-old girl that was put in the shelter. They did not have room for her. She's kind of in a empty, not an empty room, but an empty space is what they're calling it, downstairs, as they try to accommodate her. There is one family that has hopes of moving out this week, and I'll keep everybody posted to the count as it changes.
Thanks, Teresa. Anyone else on Zoom? Okay, now Randy.
Okay. Email went out, I think, Friday, so this is just a reminder that at the Rise of Worship, we're going to have, as brief as possible, a meeting for business. There is only one item of business, and if you can stay and support us, please just sit down. If you have to leave, please leave quietly, and we'll make this as quick as possible and seamless as possible. Thank you.
Friends, as we come together to support one another as we grieve and to laugh together, which is very important, help us to remember that around the world, people are fighting, people are hungry. We spend a lot of money trying to find a sub to avoid terrible loss that we anticipated. But at the same time, off the coast of Greece, we had people falling off a boat, and there was not the same attention to that. We live in a world that's very, very confused, but at the same time, when we come here together at Fairfield, we are one family, and we love and care about each other. Thank you for that. Now, we have the center, or the gathering of food. I don't know if there's somebody assigned to distribute the baskets, but I think we could find 2 volunteers. Jimmy, could you help us? Thank you. And as the food baskets are distributed, could we also remember that if you want to support Fairfield, we have a plate back there under the clock for any donations that you want to give, as well as the electronic measures that are available on our website. Thank you. Thank you, Trey. Wow, look at all that food. We are a very generous meeting. Now, as we move to our centering thoughts and we will follow with a short amount of silence. Cindy and I talked about her message today, and I'm going to provide a poem that goes along with her message, written by Amanda Gorman. I don't know if you remember her during the inauguration, but she is a shining example of the youth of America. I was expecting the sun to be shining, so please give me a pass there. The miracle of morning. I thought I'd awaken to a world in mourning, heavy clouds crowding, a society storming. But there's something different on this golden morning, something magical in the sunlight, wide and warming. I see a dad with a stroller taking a jog. Across the street, a bright-eyed girl chases her dog. A grandma on a porch fingers her rosaries. She grins as her young neighbor brings her groceries. While we might feel small, separate, and all alone, our people have never been more closely tethered. The question isn't if we will weather this unknown, but how we will weather this unknown together. So on this meaningful morn, we mourn and we mend. Like light, we can't be broken, even when we bend. As one, we will defeat both despair and a disease. We will stand with healthcare heroes and all employees, with families, libraries, schools, waiters and artists, businesses, restaurants, and hospitals hit hardest. We ignite not in the light, but in the lack thereof, for it is in loss that we truly learn to love. In this chaos, we will discover clarity. In suffering, we must find solidarity. For it's our grief that gives us our gratitude, shows us how to find hope if we ever lose it. So ensure that this ache wasn't endured in vain. Do not ignore the pain. Give it purpose, use it. Read children's books, dance alone to DJ music. Know that this distance will make our hearts grow fonder. From a wave of woes, our world will emerge stronger. We'll observe how the burdens braved by humankind are also the moments that make us humans kind. Let every dawn find us courageous, brought closer, heeding the light before the light is over. When this ends, we'll smile sweetly, finally seeing, in testing times, we became the best of beings. This was written by Youth Poet Laureate Amanda Gorman, entitled The Miracle of Morning. This morning, I hope we can think about how we are inspired to move forward when times are tough, and we think about giving up because we think it cannot get worse. Instead, let us learn about the past, the unknown heroes who guide those who were able to overcome tremendous obstacles to move forward, as individuals or as family, to others who can reach their potential. And as Amanda Gorman states, they become the best of beings, just as Jesus told us to love one another.
Good morning. I'm Cindy Strietelmeier. Hi, Zoomers. I used to be a Zoomer. Do you remember when you were a Zoomer? I promised that I would not wander from this mic. If I start to wander, you will tell me, right? Okay. At the end of May, Ann Tarvin called me to ask about speaking at meeting. It was the day before I was heading out on a trip, a 9-hour bus trip to Montgomery, Alabama, with 28 Episcopalians. Anne's call was kind of a cosmic nudge saying, I should tell you about the trip. So I said yes. The Social Justice and Racial Reconciliation Working Group, gotta love that title, that I'm involved with at Trinity Episcopal Church in Indianapolis called it a pilgrimage, like many of the church's other travel programs. I was more used to words like field trip, but if you hear pilgrimage, think intentional, discovery, learning, reflection, witness, maybe even incarnational, as in committing yourself to be there in the flesh. One of the folks from the working group had traveled to see a site called the Legacy Museum from Enslavement to Mass Incarceration and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama. She was profoundly moved by the experience and thought the site would make for a doable short pilgrimage. The museum and memorial opened in 2018. It's a project of the Equal Justice Initiative, an advocacy organization founded by attorney Brian Stevenson in 1989. Maybe you've seen Brian Stevenson on 60 Minutes or a TED Talk, or you know him through his book Just Mercy or the movie that was inspired by it. The Equal Justice Initiative says this about the site. Modeled on important projects used to overcome difficult histories of genocide, apartheid, and horrific human rights abuses in other countries, EJI's sites are designed to promote a more hopeful commitment to racial equality and just treatment of all people. So the basic plan. On June 1st, we'd ride the bus to Montgomery, the 9 hours, and watch 2 video documentaries on the way. Wouldn't want to waste any time. On June 2nd, we'd visit the Legacy Museum and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery. That means going to the multimedia museum that traces 400 years of history that connects enslavement and its aftermath to mass incarceration and poverty today. The memorial recognizes victims of thousands of lynchings around the country up through 1959. Thousands, county by county. On June 3rd, we'd head back to Indianapolis, but with a stop at Birmingham to spend a couple of hours at the Civil Rights National Monument. Then 9 hours on a bus back to Indianapolis, in the company of 28 Episcopalians, 2 black and 26 white, in case you want to picture us. Before the trip, the pilgrimage, we pilgrims met by Zoom for reading and discussion. We attended a local panel discussion on what history is taught in Indiana schools. And at a final meeting, we were there to in part share why each of us was going on this pilgrimage. I should remember that when you're going around the circle to share, you want to be at about the halfway point. I was near the end, so it felt like all the good answers had already been given, and I would just be saying, same here, ditto. What's the Quaker phrase for that? That friend speaks to my condition? I should have thought of that. But in the end, I said I needed to put my whole self in the places to listen and learn. So, what did I learn? In place of a PowerPoint or a slideshow, I'll have to describe some of the things that are still playing in the slideshow in my head. Imagine the clicker. Entering the museum, I noticed that the docents and other employees were black and relatively young. Different from, hey, a trip to some of the other museums I've been. And so were most of the visitors that particular morning. There was an immense video wall showing a constantly moving ocean as if seen from a ship. And then a sculpture down by our feet. that showed many and various African people up to their shoulders in sand. Powerful images. Videos and text and illustrations showed how the transatlantic slave trade involved everyone in the Americas, North and South, regardless of whether they were enslavers or traffickers themselves. Maps pointed out that the museum itself is on a site where Black people were forced to labor. It's just a few blocks from one of the most prominent slave auction spaces in America and near the rail station where tens of thousands of Black people were trafficked. Pay attention to where you are. There were special effects, ghostly holographic characters who came to life and described their experiences in the slave market, their pain at separation from family, and more. There was material about the construction of race. That construction brought about by a need to justify chattel slavery, justifications endorsed by church, science, economics, and law, or at least how those things were known then. Throughout, violence against the enslaved was justified to keep the system running. I read text about court decisions, congressional actions or inactions, laws at every level, and other deliberate actions taken at every stage to support that system. After emancipation, enslavement was kept alive with new names: arrests for vagrancy and other so-called crimes to provide cheap labor through convict leasing, systems of unimaginable debt for farmers, and always the threat, even the promise of violence. Illustrations of lynching, violence, threats, depicted in newspapers, quotations, statistics, and more. The bravery of people who led campaigns protesting lynching, the cowardice and cruelty of those who continued it. On a timeline, I spotted a listing for 1875. It said, William Kemmer, lynched in Hancock County, Indiana. I looked it up later. The lynching was at the county fairgrounds. There was a display of 800 jars of soil collected from the sites of lynchings around the country. A computer display helps you look up recorded lynchings in your state, like in Marion, Indiana, Posey County, Indiana, George Tompkins in Indianapolis. Stories of people fleeing violence in the South, where law stated who could go where, and those people landing in the North and the West, where it was less clearly stated, but still true, that they weren't welcome, especially after sundown. I saw pictures from my birth year, 1955, the year Emmett Till was murdered, and the year Rosa Parks refused to change her bus seat. I was born in Tennessee when my dad served in the Air Force. I wondered if my mom ever rode the bus and what it was like. I need to ask her. Quotes from the 1960s were presented in recordings from the day, and I started to recognize some things from the soundtrack of my youth. I turned the corner and stepped into the area on mass incarceration today. All the targeted communities, unfair arrests, unfair trials, long sentences, juveniles sentenced as adults. States with the highest lynching numbers in the past have the highest death penalty rates in the present. And just like those ghostly special effects used earlier, there were holographic prisoners telling their stories as if you were talking to them by phone, looking through the safety glass, visiting them in prison.
Hey.
There's a hall for reflection at the end of it all, and there are faces all over the walls, people who have worked hard at taking apart the system and its cruelty and injustice. I wish I could have stayed there longer. Lunch was at the restaurant in the museum building. That made for an odd mix of still being stunned by the museum's information and images, and at the same time, feeling the welcome and maybe even joy shared by the folks serving up the food. I had fried catfish and collard greens and cornbread. I was glad of the smiles that were around me, but still a little haunted, at least. We rode our bus to the memorial built on a 6-acre site with a sloping hill. A sidewalk leads you gently up the hill and sort of walks you through the history of the monument and then into the shaded structure. Maybe you've seen pictures of the over 800 rectangular steel monuments hanging from the roof or lying on the ground, one for each county in the United States where a racial terror lynching took place. Dates, places, and names are engraved on them. Here are some more mental slides. Slowly walking under the monuments, I overheard a conversation between two black women, the younger one saying that she has been hesitant to even think about bringing a child into a world that threatens violence. But then she said, seeing the museum and the memorial and the stories of people who endured and pushed back has made her reconsider. Staff members, black men and black women, were scattered throughout to offer assistance and information and to encourage a reverent quiet. I talked with the staff person at the center of the memorial. He was a veteran who had served in Iraq and other war zones. He told me names in his family Bible were connected to stories handed down about violence suffered by his family members. Worse than what I've seen, he said. He quoted an older relative as saying that Nazis could wear their uniforms in town and go places I couldn't go, literally, in their small hometown near Tuskegee. Presumably German POWs on work release. I wondered aloud where all the energy of the lynching crowds has gone now. He said, it's still here, in the police, in the military, in the prisons. I walked down a ramp toward the exit, and I ran into two fellow pilgrims talking with 3 black women who had come with a large group. Their organization was the National Council for Currently and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. They were eager to talk about their work. All 3 women had been incarcerated themselves. One shared that if there had not been efforts to reduce excessive sentences during the Obama administration, she would not be there. But I missed my grandbabies being born, she said. When I reached the exit gate, the entrance was flooded with hundreds of teenage boys and a scattering of supervisors, all in coordinated polo shirts. It was 10 busloads of participants in Alabama Boys State. After all the crazy talk in our own legislature and school board meetings recently, it seemed miraculous to see a mixed group of high school boys at this site in this state. On Saturday morning, we packed up and headed north to Birmingham to visit the museum at the Civil Rights National Monument. Note that, National Monument run by the Park Service. Across the street was Kelly Ingram Park, where protesters were hit with water cannon and attacked by police dogs. You know those pictures. On the corner was the 16th Street Baptist Church, where 4 girls were killed by a white supremacist bomb. Yeah, that one. The museum offered lots of material on the civil rights movement, but especially the story in Birmingham. There were sections recognizing local leaders and their connections with national leaders. There were old signs for colored and white and examples of fixtures from the contrasting facilities. Oh, there were pictures and recreations of violent incidents, incidents of bravery, and an enlarged copy of a page from Birmingham City Ordinances dated 1950 that read, Section 597, Negroes and white persons not to play together. It shall be unlawful for a Negro and a white person to play together or in company with each other in any game of cards, dice, dominoes, checkers, baseball, softball, football, basketball, or similar games. There was a separate ordinance just about playing pool. A tour group of black teenagers came through with a young guide talking about events I remembered from the news as a kid. How strange that those events seemed so distant, but at the same time so near. I wished I could ask the teens what they thought of it all. I also wondered if they would ask me why things are still not right. Then, 9 more hours on the bus to think. I thought, was all this information new to me? Nope, not exactly. Did anything still shock me? Yes. I thought, people were kind. People were interested. People were working hard to learn. I thought again that I've spent my life in a society that makes it possible for me to choose whether to think about race or not. At the same time, of course, there are people who can't choose. I thought, did I really fathom how much all I have and am and see around me in this country was made possible by a system that still justifies, taking life and freedom from some humans to enrich others? It becomes clearer all the time. And I thought, it's not that I've never heard or seen unfairness and fear, but the trip, the pilgrimage, has turned up the volume and focus. And it's not that I've never seen bravery or sacrifice or really acting out of hope, but I saw that too. And I thought some more. It's not that I should be the center of things, but I do need to find myself in all those pictures that are our country's history and understand my part. And I looked around and I was on a bus with a bunch of tired people. And I was glad to be gathered together in a group that was thinking about making better decisions all the time. And then we were finally back in Indianapolis at 11 o'clock at night. Oh. A couple of weeks ago, after this trip, Phil's message challenged us to include all children in the picture. If you remember, he said, we cannot bless one child without simultaneously committing ourselves to blessing every child. When we take a picture, we must be sure to include every child and not just one. When he said that, I thought of all the pictures and images I'd seen on our pilgrimage. Though some were heroic and joyful, too many illustrated a cruel and calculated opposite of blessing. Someone on the trip, at the pilgrimage, said he was continually struck by pictures of crowds of people, white people of course, gathered for a lynching. There always seemed to be at least one face turned toward the camera, sometimes all the faces turned that way, posing, often smiling and proud. And you could see that some people even brought their children. A twisted blessing. Who I am and what I have and what I know cannot be separated from the pain and challenges, joys and sorrows, triumphs, and the continuing real effects of violence in the lives of Black Americans, Brown Americans, Native Americans, no matter what this society or this system tells me. Which reminds me, last week we sang, "Lift Every Voice and Sing." The words were written by James Weldon Johnson in 1899, when reforms after the Civil War were disappearing and Jim Crow was beginning. His brother, John Rosamond Johnson, composed the music. In 1900, the song was sung by 500 Black children at the segregated school in Jacksonville, Florida, where James Weldon Johnson was serving as principal at the time. Good for those kids. They kept spreading the song. Johnson's words refer to past pain and current struggle, but also express hope. He declared that descendants of the enslaved claim this country as their home and are true to our native land. I have mixed feelings when I sing the song about oppression and struggle. I'm conscious that the oppression is likely to have been committed by people who looked like me. The struggle, not exactly mine. I feel a similar hesitation when I sing the Star-Spangled Banner, with its battle references and the land of the free and the home of the brave, that doesn't ring as true as it should, especially since Francis Scott Key was a slaveholder. So I learned a lot. I saw a lot. I want to see a lot, and I want to be part of it. I pray that we will act justly and recognize our full history together so well that all can sing out the victory of love and justice and peace and freedom and courage, all of us together, every voice lifted, and every child in the picture blessed.
I usually feel wow in response to things in nature, beauty. But Cindy, wow. Thank you for how you took that experience and how you have shared it with us. I would love to have been on that pilgrimage, and I'm wondering if others might be interested in doing a similar pilgrimage to the same site. We might organize that. Thank you, Cindy.
We'll move on to our hymn, Here I Am, Lord, in Worship and Songbook, number 260. Thank you, Cindy. That was a wonderful, inspiring, and kind message. We are all challenged in our world today. We want to do so much. We want to change so much. I despair at times that the world is not as good as it appeared to be in the 70s and 80s. I thought we were on a very positive trajectory. We were having lots of firsts. But now the backlash is swift, and it is strong. We have to be strong against it. Let us all think about peace and how we can be the light in the world to comfort each other, both here in our meeting and as we go into the world. Thank you.